time to join Eamonn McEneaney of Waterford Treasures for our virtual tour this morning. Good morning, Eamonn.
Good morning.
What are you going to be talking to us about this morning?
I'm going to talk about Thomas Sawtell Roberts. He's the son of the great architect John Roberts, of course, who practically rebuilt the whole of 18th century Waterford. And it'd be exhaustive to list out the names of the buildings he did, but very interestingly, he ended up having 22 children. Well, he and his wife did.
22 children?
22 children, yeah. Sadly, only 8 of them, as was kind of common in the 18th century, only 8 of them survived adulthood, but they were all very, very talented people. The reason the artist, and we have a wonderful painting by him, and we have lots of paintings actually of family members of the Roberts that the Roberts family gave us. It's a really fantastic collection. But we were recently donated a fantastic painting about 1780 by Thomas Sawtell, and it's a lovely romantic kind of landscape with the clouds and a storm coming and a cattle drover going through those typical 18th century romantic landscapes. What's important, I suppose, about Thomas Sawtell is his older brother was probably more talented, Thomas Roberts, and he died at the age of 27. He produced about 60 great paintings. He's regarded as the great landscape painter of 18th century. Born here in Cathedral Square in Waterford. I mean, the National Museum a few years ago went around to other institutions and private collections and were able to put on 60 paintings of his. It was a wonderful exhibition.
Wow.
I mean, he is always really famous. When he died at the age of 26 from TB, his brother took on the name Thomas. His brother was called Sawtell, and in that there's a story also, in that the family, Sawtell was his mother's name. Her name was Mary Susanna Sawtell. They came from Huguenots. They're the people we associate with the Blaas and the French church. They were French Protestants who left persecution in France to settle here in Waterford in the 1690s and early 1700s. And her family, they were French. They considered themselves very highbrow, and they certainly didn't want their lovely daughter marrying what they considered a tradesman, who was an architect at the time, were considered a tradesman. The two of them eloped, and the church, because they were working on the Bishop's Palace, he was working on the Bishop's Palace, and later on they would, of course, he would rebuild the cathedral. They gave him that house on the top of Cathedral Square where there is a tapas bar now, the green painted house. So that's where, and it's interesting, we're working on all the other houses in Cathedral Square, the next 3 houses. We found that church owned all them at the time, the Church of Ireland, and there's connecting doors between all. They're only little houses, but there's connecting doors. So obviously, the more children he had, they had to knock into the next house. And they didn't build an extension; they were already there.
It's a bit like the old woman that lived in the shoe.
Which is very much like the old woman who lived in the shoe, and he lived there, and he produced some of the wonderful paintings and lovely paintings of Waterford, and we well remember now in the museum because we have this absolutely magnificent painting by him. And unfortunately, we don't have a painting by his brother. They're as rare as hen's teeth and cost a fortune.
Wow.
He had a nephew who was a ship's captain in the British Navy, because of course, remember, Ireland was part of Britain at the time. And when the American War of Independence in the 1770s, his nephew was out there, and he's bombing Fort McHenry near Baltimore. And he had he wasn't famous at the time, but he had a prisoner on board called Francis Scott Key, and he kept bombing the fort all night with bombards and all the rest of it, and cannon. And Francis Scott Key was kept as a prisoner in the hold, and when he looked out through the porthole in the morning, he still saw an absolutely ginormous American flag, the stars and stripes, much smaller one than
Star-Spangled Banner.
The Star-Spangled Banner, exactly. And Francis Scott Key then, of course, when the war was over, he was obviously released. The British capitulated and they were defeated. And Francis Scott Key went off to write the Star-Spangled Banner, which in 1917 became the American national anthem. So it mightn't be something that Waterford people want to boast about, but because that Waterford man had this chap in the ship as a captive, he's an American, that they Star-Spangled Banner became the American national
real
anthem.
Waterford connection.
Yeah.
Eamonn, we've got to leave it there, but always interesting meeting you, and we do thank you for that. That's Eamonn McEneaney of Waterford Treasures. Thanks, Eamonn.
Thanks, Eamonn.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.